Hello and welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm your host, Lauren Archer, Executive Director of Kinship Earth. On behalf of our founders, Susan Davis-Mora, Walter Mora, and Stephen Gomes, our advisory team, our donors, members, and extended community of kindred spirits, we want to thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce today's distinguished guests, I'd like to give you a very brief overview of the KINS network phenomenon. For over 40 years, Susan Davis-Mora has established over 40 KINS innovation networks of heart-centered earth advocates who are working all over the world to raise consciousness to transform our global economy from fear and greed to generosity and love. KINS members recognize that we are part of one whole, interconnected living system. And our greatest passion is spontaneously collaborating on projects and initiatives that are collectively ushering in the regenerative renaissance. We are playing the world game to make humans net positive to nature, and we play with a strategy of generosity and win when we all win. Kinship Earth is the next evolution of KINS innovation networks, where we are building upon the foundation that Susan has already established and connecting individuals across networks to make rapid advances at this critical time. Let's watch this brief video where Susan recounts the origin story of the Solar Circle Network.
So a small miracle happened in that a very close friend of mine who was a top corporate executive from England, he was running a huge company in China. And he called me one day out of the blue and told me about a spiritual experience he had where he was told that he was supposed to devote his life to making solar happen in the world. And he knew that I made these networks of key people who, if they were brought together, they could do it. He asked me if I would do that. I said I would. It took me 6 months to find them, and I brought them together, and they were so ecstatic that they could create the solar industry they wanted that had been stamped out by the bad guys. And so in one weekend, they met for the first time. They agreed they would all do whatever it took to find the members and put them together and do the first one. They did that in 6 months. They paid for everything themselves, and it was wildly successful, and they never took credit. No one ever knew it happened because the other industry would have stamped them out. And it was a wild victory of joy and manifesting your life mission.
What a great story. Yes, we know that the oil and gas industry and the petroleum industry did not want solar to succeed. And so you brought this group of people together, and what I remember you telling me was that they created relationships and they worked together behind the scenes. And when you mentioned nobody took credit, this was not about creating some big organization. This was about people coming together, working with the spirit of generosity to create this awesome group. And it was all started by the one and only Susan Davis-Mora, founder of KINS Innovation Networks.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing the story. At each Kinship Earth Connections event, we introduce members of the KINS alumni community to share progress on their initiatives, help facilitate introductions and strategic alliances, and foster our growing community as one global network. Today, we're delighted to welcome 3 members of the Solar Circle. So, Julie Blunden. For 35 years, Julie Blunden has rapidly grown small energy companies to leaders in their sectors, from power plants to retail power, solar and EV charging. And Julie is now focused on board work related to batteries for both mobile and stationary storage, as well as their supply chains. Julie currently serves as board chair of New Energy Nexus, as well as on the boards of directors of American Battery Technology Company, ZincFive, and as an advisory board member at Plus Power. Previously, Julie held executive roles at EVgo, SunPower, Green Mountain Energy, ClimateWorks Foundation, KEMA Xenergy, and SunEdison, and began her career with a decade at AES. She has served 10 NGOs in board roles, including the Solar Energy Industries Association and the National Energy Storage Association. A native Ohioan, Julie earned her MBA at Stanford's Graduate School of Business and majored in engineering, modified with environmental studies at Dartmouth College. So welcome, Julie. And then I'm going to introduce Titus and Richard and then turn the floor over to the three of you. So Titus Brennickmeyer. Titus is the founder and president of Solgenics LLC, an investment company with a primary focus on privately held companies that install or sell solar energy systems. In particular, these systems generate electricity, photovoltaic, or hot water, thermal, from sunlight in order to serve residential or small commercial customers. The geographic focus of Solgenics is North America and emerging markets, where Solgenics works with companies that apply only proven technologies. Through its program of active investment management, Solgenics supports the strategic focused growth of such companies. And Solgenics sees the power of solar energy as a catalyst for favorable social, economic, and political change. By helping others help themselves, Solgenics helps to promote a sense of community through advocacy and enabling environments to create a single voice for local entrepreneurs. Through its support of entrepreneurs, Solgenics provides the means for increased creativity and innovations that will drive the future of renewable energy where it is most needed. And Richard Hansen. Richard is the founder and president of Soluz Incorporated, a company based in Massachusetts with a division in Honduras. Soluz is committed to advancing sustainable energy in developing or emerging market countries. Richard is a pioneer in the application of photovoltaic technology combined with microfinance to increase energy access in rural areas of Honduras, having introduced PV technology in the country starting in 1989 under a contract with the U.S. Department of Energy. Richard has provided advisory services for major institutions, including USAID, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank in Bangladesh, Bolivia, the Dominican Republic, Ethiopia, Haiti, India, Nepal, Nicaragua, the Philippines, and elsewhere. He has also been an invited speaker in countries ranging from Argentina and Honduras to Senegal and the Philippines. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts, and a master's degree in business administration from Boston University in Boston, Massachusetts. So our three very distinguished guests, what an honor to have you all with us today. And I know each of you has a few minutes that you would like to share. And then at the end of your presentation, we'd like to open the floor for some questions and answers. So before we begin, Susan, is there anything that you wanted to insert into the conversation to welcome our guests?
No, just go girl. This is
all righty.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so I'd like to turn the floor over to the three of you. Welcome and take it away.
Right, so I'm Julie Blunden and I'll speak first. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that I am very grateful that our origin story happened and that Susan went to the trouble of so carefully investigating and selecting the original members of the Solar Circle, most of whom are still active today. The Solar Circle never intended to be a thing in and of itself. It intended to be a group of folks that reinforced each other, and as we developed our own path, that's really what we became. I thought about what word I would use to describe what the Solar Circle has been for me. And I really came up with two. The first is my core community, and the second is sort of a sanctuary. And the sanctuary part kind of struck me strongly, and I want to talk a little bit about that because I think there's an element to the core piece of trust that sits underneath the solar circle, which is why I won't name any of our members today because I haven't asked them for that, and we all trust each other. What we have, though, and what Susan found in us was an incredibly strong core mission. We all really saw an opportunity for solar to become the dominant energy resource in the world. And we're there. It is hard to see it if you aren't really looking. But as of now, which is about 20 years after the original catalyzing moment, we're there. What's happening next, what's being built next is solar first. Wind and other renewable resources are also growing at incredible rates. But the element that is true of solar, which makes it so, so powerful and important in terms of long-term sustainability within the globe, is that it is ubiquitous. So you can put solar from Antarctica to the highest, most remote peak in the hardest to reach place on Earth, and it works. It doesn't work at night, but with the right resilient network, you can use solar as your primary energy resource anywhere on Earth, and we're now demonstrating that that's the case. So the people that Susan put together with that core shared mission of seeing that vision had to be people who had unfailing pragmatic optimism and a very broad, diverse group of connections and commitments to make that happen, which allowed each of us to basically create network effects between us so that if somebody had a question or was looking for a resource, we could go within that team and find one or two steps removed almost anybody on Earth we were looking for. It wasn't that big of a group to get off the ground, a couple dozen people, maybe grew to 3 dozen over the course of kind of our path. But that group of folks saw the solar circle, and remains today, a place of kind of a sanctuary community where when you come to the solar circle, which is an event, you get to go and spend some quiet time there and listen to each other and be there in full presence. That's a place where people understand where you're coming from and trust that what you're doing is the thing that you think is best for the world, and they're going to help you. That's an incredible, incredible gift. So for me, at age 13, when I decided I was going to make solar happen for the world, I couldn't conceive that there would be a group of people like that. And although I bumped into a few in my college and post-college career, it wasn't really until I turned about 30 when the opportunity for connections to a broad group of folks that were like-minded was possible. And it's been, for me, an incredible resource, both for the people, the connections, the catalyzing ideas, but also one thing that I think is maybe underappreciated about that kind of sanctuary community. It's a place for it to be celebrated. And one of the things that I took away in the first decade or so was that those elders in our community that had done some of the most grueling work over several decades at the time when I was maybe a decade into it, they were very uncelebrated. In fact, beaten down upon, as Susan referenced. And so for them to have an opportunity to be identified as rock stars in a group of a few dozen folks who appreciated what they had done, the amount of not just celebration for those individuals' sake, but recognition that every person can make a difference, but rarely completely on their own. And that opportunity to create that positive energy of success and have it trickle down across the group is something that probably is hard to measure, but is incalculable in terms of the impact. The other thing I wanted to say is that Susan looked carefully at constituencies, was the language she used, which made sense to me at the time. My appreciation for it, though, grew over time, recognizing that what we had in the group was folks with very different perspectives coming in from the NGO community, from trade organizations, from little companies, from big established companies. And then we watched people go through, in some cases, multiple jobs. I think if you look through my Solar Circle career, I've probably been through 4 or 5 different roles. And we've watched folks move around. I just talked to one of our friends this week, and she just took a new job, which is fantastic. I think it'll be right up her alley. And although there's lots of folks that are now working on other things, whether they're batteries or offshore wind is a huge one these days, all of them are still somehow connected to the overall effort of bringing a healthier planet into our future. Incredibly valuable. The other thing I want to say is one of the younger members of the Solar Circles we got going, I was either still pregnant or had just had my second child, who just graduated from high school and is headed to college. So you can see how long ago that was. The older folks in the group that had been through multiple cycles in their careers and had stuck with it and been very, very impactful in the early days of solar, my appreciation for those elders is kind of hard to overstate. We had, about a half a dozen folks that fit that category, several of whom I had connections to ahead of time. But I really credit them with giving me a view forward of how you can zigzag through life. You can live through grief and pain of losing loved ones. You can think about retiring, coming out of retirement, going back into semi-retirement. That notion that you can take one moment in time, where I was early on in my Solar Circle career, which was working 80-hour to 100-hour weeks, killing myself and just flying to Europe 3 weeks in a row, like it was intense. Being able to envision that there were paths forward where I could continue to participate and succeed in making a difference, but not always having to look at my current lifestyle as the only way to do that. That was really personally important to me. And we've just lost a couple members, the first couple to pass away in the last month. And I'm particularly grateful to both of them for their not direct guidance, but for their path making and their willingness to shine a light on how to be as one ages. So with that, let me pass the torch to, I think, Titus.
No, I think Richard is going to be the next one.
Then to Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, one of the things I really enjoy about the Solar Circle is listening to Julie give us an update where I spend a lot of time in places like Honduras, and I can be with our group and really learn about what's going on and just keep in touch with the pulse. And Julie certainly is able to do that and enjoy that very much. Lauren, I wanted to share slides. I'm going to kind of give a little tour of some of the areas we've been with Solar Circle, and
here it comes.
Okay.
Should be.
Let's see if I can do a little sharing there then. All right, I'm going to open that up. Are you seeing that okay? Okay. So, when we started, the original mission in 2003 was to catalyze the rapid growth of solar around the world. And we had constituencies, like Julie mentioned. And so the constituency I was in, and there were a few other people with that, solar in the developing world. And that's where I wanted to use slides to kind of take you along the way where we've gone. I think that when I thought about connecting with other circles that Susan has created, first of all, our circle was just phenomenal, perfect time in history to happen. But I think there's a potential connection for us all. We're in a time when just so much collaboration is needed internationally. As you look at these two graphs, one is the CO2 level. So we're concerned about climate change. And then as we look around the world, with a growing population, in the conditions around the world. So I think that there's a lot that we can share among groups, and I think the climate issue and sustainability runs through probably all the groups. And so, with our efforts for solar, and I frequently say at our gatherings, I'm the voice that the sun shines for all. I know that Julie mentioned that as well, but really, there's so many places in the world that don't have electricity. The majority are on the African continent at this point, over 600 million people without access to electricity. But I'll take you today, I want to give you some exposure to what we're doing in Honduras. So right in our backyard, people that are living, still without electricity. And also, we had a great gathering that resulted from the Solar Circle in India. And I'll give you some insights into how we did that, part of the efforts to collaborate across borders. I wanted to give you an idea of how I ended up probably in the Solar Circle. I kind of got an early start in the solar industry. I purchased my first PV module solar panel in November '83 when the industry was 20.8 megawatts of global capacity. And now if you look at how that's grown over the years, here's a graph so the first graph I showed was from a document from the Solar Energy Industry Association, 1980 to 86. The next graph is 2000 to 220. You can see how it's grown, and we're now looking at, Julie probably has the latest number, but the global production of on the order of 200,000 megawatts now. So it's been a phenomenal growth. It's been great. I mean, we started in 2003. You can barely see it on the graph, and then you can see how things have moved along. So I kind of got an early start on that. And, as the prices came down, here's a graph showing prices, in 77 of $76. As the prices came down, it got to about $7 a watt. In the decade of the 80s, these solar modules that looked like this at the time with these round cells and had 5-year warranties started to become useful in rural areas to replace kerosene lamps and batteries. And so I ended up, I had visited the Dominican Republic a number of times, and I started to find out that only half the people had access to electricity. So there's the first customer that I had, Felipe Martinez, a pioneer in the use of solar in the community Bay of East in Sosua, Dominican Republic. And there's the solar panel on the roof. You can see that. It was a solar product, but it was combined with a financial product, a microcredit payment plan of 48 months. I trusted Felipe and his wife, Altagracia, and they definitely paid every month for 48 months for the value of the system. So we didn't start giving away. We used essentially what they're already spending on kerosene and dry cells to pay for the systems that were installed. I'll just make a note. That's my daughter at about a few months old, and photo taken in 1988. So I have 2 children that are half Dominican, born in the Dominican Republic. So I have been immersed in the Latin American, culture and all for many years. And these early systems were essentially a PV panel with a storage battery and a control unit. You could connect basic items that they're already using, like the radio, and at the time the tape players that were using a lot of dry cells, and then basic lighting, and even televisions that were black and white that were being charging car batteries to run those. So by 91 and 92, we had a total of 1,000 systems installed by local enterprises. So the approach was to train local enterprises so that people were getting into the business of solar. Most were installed by the model business that I had started in the province of Puerto Plata. But as that happened, and we started to get some traction and things were happening on our own sweat equity and all, the work ended up being studied by the World Bank, and then it was supported for application by the United States Department of Energy and the US Peace Corps. So here's a visit from a World Bank mission. They had been to Sri Lanka, Philippines, and Indonesia, and it was for the Asian area to start planning, and it was best practice of photovoltaic household electrification. So what was happening at that time, it was just starting to emerge, and they were identifying places in the world where the solar technology was getting traction, where it became another option for rural electrification. Here's a photo of an eco-lodge with a solar fridge and water pump. That's actually my house in the Dominican Republic. I've got a circle around with a solar panel that pumps about 300 gallons of water up to the eco-lodge. It's a special place. It's a natural place. I was there in May for a couple of weeks after being tied down with COVID. It's very nurturing to be in the setting. And But there's an important gathering that happened there. This goes, prior to being invited in by Susan into the Solar Circle and meeting so many great people in the sector. In 1991, we had a visit from the Peace Corps. So we had these three people there, were invited from the Peace Corps to come over to the Dominican Republic because we had collaborated with the Peace Corps in the Dominican Republic. The suggestion was perhaps we could collaborate with Peace Corps in Honduras. Also, we had a visit at that same time was with folks from Sandia National Labs, one of the U.S. Department of Energy laboratories, and this was Beth Richards and Max Harcourt. And also in that same little gathering, this is in the living room of my house there, so I'm kind of glad that we're able to have this take place there. From University of Massachusetts in Lowell, we had a visit from Harish Handi, who at the time was a master's degree student. He's now a rock star, having put solar in, I'm assuming it's well over 1 million homes now in India. So it's quite a thing. I was also sitting at the table. You can see the top of my head there. But anyway, so that arranged for funding from Sandia National Lab. And I had established initially an NGO to introduce photovoltaics for rural electrification. And we started in Honduras. We engaged this woman in part of the non-NGO activity, Diana Solis. She's now with the Secretary of Energy in Honduras. We also had a person who had been a Peace Corps trainer who got involved with training solar, Peace Corps volunteers and counterparts, Eric Lespin. He's now involved with teaching renewable energy in Nigeria, which is a country with a very large number of people off grid. So, it's all about the people that come in and get involved and, keeping connected and building collaborations. And at the time when we were in Honduras, there was only less than 50% of the Hondurans had access to electric grid. So this is in our backyard in the Americas. And so in 1994, and then we made some investment and structured the company in 98 of Soluz Honduras. It's a Sociedad Anónima de Capital Variable, and it's based in San Pedro Sula. So we had a business set up. That's a few years before the Solar Circle came in, and I was more or less moving along. We had an office in La Ceiba. More recently, that office gets into Gracias a Dios. I'll show you later why that's interesting to reach that area. It's really an area that's there's no roads, it's very difficult to get to. And recently we put an office in Yorba, and I'll explain what we're doing there. This family here, this is a typical rural customer of the solar home system in Honduras. So to give you a sense on that, we were finding that there are a number of companies that were emerging around the world that were solar entrepreneurs, and we structured this within the Solar Circle. We arranged an agreement with Navigant Consulting to do a multi-client study, and Co-op America was one of the funders, and Oak Foundation, and we had a number of funders, United Nations Foundation, and Solgenics was a funder in this. That's Titus's company. And we basically looked at the status of innovation in rural energy delivery as a way to accelerate energy access through small and medium enterprises. And we set up in June of 2005, learning from Susan in terms of this was like a Solar Circle spinoff. We were able to pull together 12 leading solar entrepreneurs around the world, 4 from Latin America, 4 enterprises, and 4 from the African continent, Morocco, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, and then 4 from Asia. And Selco was in India. It was actually hosted by them. We had from Nepal, Bangladesh, and Philippines. So this was really a great activity that we had, this was in 2005, 2 years after Solar Circle. We were really, I think, learning from Susan and built this collective, people that could exchange information across borders. So here we are in India. We had people were presenting what they were doing and time to exchange with each other. Here you can see that my friend Titus and I were there next to each other. And Selco India, they were the ones that sponsored this. So we had, Harish Handi here is a member of the Solar Circle. He hasn't been involved too much recently. He's really been extremely busy now internationally, and we've, travel-wise been difficult. But Harish is a real rock star in efforts to create livelihoods and reduce poverty with solar. And in India, and he's also been able to spin off a foundation that's done a lot of work. So we're always happy to get updates from Harish, and he sponsored and re-hosted essentially this gathering. We did another gathering, a second one in 2008, and these were field visits in Honduras. So our business, Soluz Honduras, sponsored that. And again, you'll see that Titus gets around. There he is in Honduras. So I didn't let Titus know I had all these photos of him before we had this gathering, but he can see that now. Over on the right is our friend from the Philippines. So he flew quite a distance to arrive in Honduras. And here's Henry from Uganda. We had a good group of people that came in. There's a website of Soluz Honduras for those who want to say. I can get that to you later on. Well, what came out of this study and really looking at what all the companies were doing, we looked at kind of 4 key elements that are crucial to scaling up SMEs. First, you need to have some degree of enabling environment in the country, some ability to be able to operate a business and other factors that can help a business thrive. Then you need to have enterprise finance. The enterprise needs to have enough capital for working capital inventory and assets as well. There's a need for consumer finance, and that can be a significant amount of funds, particularly if you're giving longer-term finance to customers. And then we also learned, there's really a need for some innovation funding. It's hard to extract, let's say, all the funding out of, the poor customer base. So for some innovation development, some innovation funding is needed. So I'm going to take you to Honduras now, based on those elements, and I'll present kind of how we've done that. But Honduras is still, it's much more electrified now. It's actually 85% electrified, but 30% of the rural population have no access. There's been a population increase more in the urban areas, but the rural folks are still in the dark there. And so this map shows the percentage of families without access. The red area is the one with the least access. Only a little over 7% have access to electricity. That's Gracia de Dios. We actually head out there ourselves. In the yellow, it's less than 80%, and then the orange is less than 70%. So it depends on which, these are called departments, like provinces, and those are data from the electric company, how much coverage they have. The sector of energy is involved with doing that. So there's 300,000 homes without any access at this point, like I say, in our backyard here in the Americas. And people are still using what is called here ocote, which is one of the forms of lighting. It's a pine wood with a lot of resin that you can light up to that, or candles. So this is the reality. I wanted to be able to show you what's happening if people don't have the solar option. And along the way, the United Nations has established the Sustainable Development Goals. And goal number 7 is universal access. This is affecting how governments look at this, and multilateral organizations such as the World Bank or the regional development banks, in terms of striving for what is universal access to energy, as well as a greater amount of clean energy in the mix. So this is affecting in the region, it's affecting Honduras. The government is looking at how to get universal access by 2030. That's the goal. And what we've done is looked at, affordable payment options. And, the number of people who can afford a cash payment for a system is limited. It might be 10 or 20% at this point, with some small products, or larger products, depending on their ability to buy. Credit can reach, say, 50%, but there's still a portion of the population that's very difficult to reach with a significant product. And so there's discussions about partial subsidies or other options to make that happen. And what we're doing for financing, we use Kiva crowdfunding. I don't know how many of you have been familiar with Kiva. Here's their website, www.kiva.org. And it's a crowdfunding. We essentially post a customer, and we're borrowing the money from various people. You can see over on the right here, we're providing credit plans that are 12 to 24 months and 18% annual or 1.5% per month. But we post our customers on a website, and then various people, lenders over on the right, you see lenders that have lent to there, and you're going to find there's Titus again. He's a lender, and I'm also there from Boston. You can see we're both also signing up and lending to our customers, but people from all over the world lend. And we find that I mean, sometimes Titus and I have a hard time making a loan because sometimes it's a matter of only hours before our customers are financed through crowdfunding. I wanted to show you, in addition to the KEVA, which is a nice advancement, is that the development of technology, because of the vast market in Africa, there's a lot of products coming out, and there's a development of what is called PAYGO, where the customer can buy a system on credit, and then the system will operate for a month, and it's almost like a prepaid cell phone. You get a PAYGO code or a pay-as-you-go code, and you dial that into the pad each month to get another month's worth of service until the system's paid for. So this woman has a product that's called Greenlight Planet. It's their Sun King Home. It's a 40-watt system. The price is about $350. Here's another system that gave basic lighting, 3 lights, a cell phone. You can see the one on the left can power a TV, but the cell phones and the radios can be done with these smaller systems that are just 12 watts at about $200 for a household, light their small home and be communicated with cell phone. So Soluz Honduras, our company in Honduras, is striving to figure out how to get universal access. We can skim the cream, or we can, kind of get deeper into the economic pyramid using our KEVA financing, but we're still struggling to reach everyone. How do you get universal access? I don't think that's happening. Perhaps nowhere in the world it's happening. There's work trying to do that now. So we have a new store in Yoro, which is opened during COVID in April 21. We actually opened a new store. It's a region where there's a lot of indigenous population. The Tulapan indigenous population is there. We serve them. And here's Titus again. Titus is in the countryside of Yoro. He was there in December 2019. It was his last visit that he was before COVID came to Honduras. There's Titus. This is a customer with a very small solar panel to charge solar lanterns, really very modest investment. I wanted to mention that here is Isabel. She's our credit manager that manages the KEVA financing. So we've essentially brought somebody in that's from the microfinance industry. She worked for Finca for a decade, and it's now, she's with us to finance solar in rural areas, which is a challenge. So I wanted to let you know about some of our customers. Here's a woman, Delma, in Yoro. She's got a 12-watt system. Here's a woman, Flor, in Yoro. She's got a 40-watt system. That one powers the TV set, 19-inch. And here's Iris in Yoro. She's got a 60-watt system. That system actually can come with a 32-inch TV, so they can have some entertainment in their home in these areas. But in addition to that, we assemble larger kits from 80 watts to 660 watts, providing 10 kilowatt hours a month to 80. We also do solar-powered freezers. So here's Ophelia. She's a woman who has a store, a rural store, and invested in a solar-powered freezer financed by KEVA, Soluz with KEVA funds. And she's one of many women, actually. Here's Dilcia, Karen, Idania. Here's Iris. Iris has actually 2 freezers there. You can see those. She invested in one and making good money, invested in another. And here's Rosa, who's in the Department of Yoro. And you can only visit Rosa when it's not raining because it's very hard to get up to the mountain area, but she does have her store and solar-powered freezer there. So we're very happy to be able to support. We've done hundreds of solar-powered freezers. Many women have that business. So, we're putting the pieces together. I want to get back to those 4 elements that we pulled together under that study we did, and drawing from the different companies. So in Soluz Honduras, our company, which we use as an example, the enabling environment piece of this, we do have import duty exoneration, so we can bring in solar panels and components without paying import tariffs. And we have access to electrification plans. I keep connecting with the Secretary of Energy to kind of know what's going on there. We also have the enterprise finance piece of this. Soluz Inc., our Massachusetts company, is invested in Soluz Honduras, and so is Solgenics, both with equity. And Soluz Inc. and KEVA have provided debt financing. And then our customer financing, as I mentioned, comes from KEVA, the crowdfunding platform. So, there's a number of the components. For the innovation funding, right at this time, we're really looking at the methods to achieve universal access. We're really dealing with the very last mile, challenging areas, a lot of poverty. So we're we're trying to still figure out who our sponsors will be on that. That's to be determined. But Honduras is, if you look at Latin America, not including Haiti, Latin American countries, Honduras has the highest percentage of poverty, extreme poverty, very, very poor and poor. People are very vulnerable to climate effects. So, we're all concerned globally about climate, and Honduras in November 2020 was hit hard by two hurricanes, Iota and Eta. And that's those impacts were very severe up in the northern region, actually where our office is and where we operate. People are, desperate to get out of the flooding. This is one of the caravans. This is the people leaving San Pedro Sula area and basically walking to the United States through Mexico, basically leaving the country as climate refugees. So, the situation's not easy. Poverty and vulnerability and they're one of the most vulnerable countries really for climate impacts. The World Bank has developed a new way of looking at energy. It's not just whether you have the electric grid or not. There's different tiers of energy, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, different levels, the amount of energy you have and the consistency you have. Solus Honduras has served about 30,000 customers with tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Our refrigerators are actually tier 3. We've done schools that are tier 4. But right now, in terms of universal access, we're looking at this tier 1. How do we make sure that everybody gets at least tier 1? The gray area would be the woman with that acote, that pine stick, and really no electricity. And so this is what we need to work with, and we need to really build some collaborations on that. So I just got this email today, literally 2 hours ago, and I just stuck it on here because there's a webinar that's happening next week. It's about subsidizing end user prices. And here it says, despite ambitious 2030 electrification targets, which is the goals for sustainable development overall, many countries are experiencing low electrification rates, especially in rural areas where 85% of the folks in the world that don't have energy, that's where they are. And an obvious way to ensure universal access is and to bridge the affordability gap is by subsidizing products. So there's ways to do that without distorting the markets. How to do that. So anyway, against that background, there's this end user subsidy lab formed by the World Bank, their Lighting Global program, along with GOGLA, which is the association of companies that are supplying products. But it's focused mainly on Africa, so it's not going to address the Americas. I'm in touch with folks at the World Bank. They're not operating in anything in energy right now in our region. But what we're doing is also kind of staying on top of that. I'll join in that webinar and looking at our innovative pilot for universal access in Honduras. Here's a one with a very small system. As you can charge a radio and the light with 400 lumens off that little panel. But what we want to do here is to obtain results-based funding, about $100 per household, providing some customer support to increase the affordability and some Solus support to cover that last mile logistical challenges. We actually would like to structure blocks of about $10,000 for 100 households. That would be for tier 1, so that's less than 50 watts. That's what I mentioned in the prior slide. 10 blocks would be serving 1,000 households. That would be a total of about $100,000. And so we are seeking sponsors for blocks of $10,000 for 100 households. We think that perhaps there could be a linkage with large energy projects that are getting electrons, clean electrons from solar or wind to people who have access, and these folks aren't going to be connected to that. We, as you can see, Titus has visited us. A lot of people come in and visit us, so we can, arrange for site visits on that. And by 2030, we'd like to reach another 10,000 of the poor families in remote areas that way. And this is basically an invitation to collaborate with Solus Honduras. For those who are interested in this, Lauren mentioned that I do advisory work, and so drawing upon our knowledge, our deep knowledge from serving rural customers for many years, I also provide input for activities in other countries. So if somebody's interested in some other countries, I can provide input for that. But essentially for Solus Honduras to move forward, we want to be doing some of this innovation pilot to reach universal access in this area of Yoro. Before I sign off, I just want to mention, if you do visit us, you can come to our office here in San Pedro Sula. And of course, our office is powered off of solar. and it's a 5 kilowatt system. It has a new Solarc hybrid inverter, which you can see there's a battery bank here under the inverter. There's the Solarc inverter. This is because we have a lot of power outages in Honduras, so it's a hybrid system. So if the power goes out, we can keep our office running, including the air conditioning, because it's a very hot city, and our employees aren't very productive when the power's out and they're, sweating there. So that's a good improvement. But we do provide these types of systems you would see here in the States, grid-tied systems rather than off-grid. We've done this children's home here with 4 grid-tied systems, the clinic, the school, the office, and the cafeteria. So here's the school. We put in 14 450 watt panels, the 6.6 kilowatt inverter. And we've done the clinic. In that case, we've done 24 panels and a hybrid inverter, because in the clinic, they need to make sure that they have very reliable powers. There's a battery bank there. In the school, it was just about lowering the electric bill, but in the clinic, they really need to keep the power going. So that's the case there. And I'm going to wrap up with this slide, which is the home that I live in there with my wife in Honduras when I'm there about 6 months of the year, about half the time. The house is solar powered. And if somebody comes to visit us in Honduras, we'd be glad to pick you up in Esperanza, my Nissan Leaf, which is one of the first electric cars in Honduras, and it's charged off the solar panels on the roof. I feel that I'm always trying to communicate in the solar circle, keeping the connection that there's el sol sale para todos, the sun shines for all, and I think that that's something we can bring, to the network of the KIMS networks, to really just help assure that we, the level of quality of life and productivity. Harish Handi is doing a lot of work with his foundation on that. So, it's part of what the Solar Circle can offer. And Titus and I have both been involved in developing country activities for those that are working in, other types of activities. I'm sure we can interact and find ways to make things blossom. So I'll sign off there, and I hand off to my friend Titus. Titus, I didn't tell you ahead of time of all those photos, but you get around. You're on mute, Titus, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, Richard, thanks so much. And let me also talk a little bit about the fact, won't take too much time, but talk a little bit about the fact in terms of what the Solar Circle actually meant for me in my career, and how it actually sort of moved me along. So I was born in Europe, I'm Dutch, and I came to the States to go to college, to go to business school, but I spent the 25 first years of my career in apparel retailing. And I actually worked in apparel retailing, so clothing retailing, in 3 different continents and 6 different countries. And 9 of those years I actually spent in Brazil, where I was in charge of buying and advertising for a Brazilian apparel retailer. Now, while I was in Brazil, this was in the 90s, we visited with the buyers. We visited many manufacturers that were, based all over Brazil. They were making clothing for the store. And some of these manufacturers were based in large cities, but some of them also in very, very small communities. And in some of these small communities, I was only there for a couple of days at the time. You could see very quickly some of these small communities, only the large buildings and maybe the offices were connected to the grid. But a lot of the people that actually worked in these offices or that worked in these factories, they were living in off-grid, off-grid homes. And you could see, even after a couple of days, you could see a difference in public health, education, economic development in these communities. And, it was a huge difference. I noticed this at the time, but I wasn't really quite sure what to do about that in terms of, how you could make a difference with regards to that. Then in 2001, I moved to Los Angeles to work for another retailer. And then in California, it was actually the first time I heard from a number of people that talked about solar energy and the fact how with solar energy, you could generate electricity anywhere where there was sunlight. And so I actually got very, very interested in solar energy through that experience that I had in Brazil. Now, the holding company that I worked for, that owned these apparel, these apparel companies or these retail companies, they also had a private equity fund called Good Energies. And Good Energies was investing in solar and in wind companies. And so I got very, very interested in that. So I joined in 2003, I joined Good Energies. At the time, Good Energies had investments in upstream solar companies. These are basically companies that make silicone solar cells, solar panels. So they're basically on the top of the solar production chain. And I was always very interested in investing in downstream companies. So companies that really build systems for the end user. They would buy all their different components, and then with these components would build systems that they would immediately sell to the end user. And those, obviously, those companies, the capital or the investments were smaller because most of the money went to working capital rather than, capital investments in manufacturing facilities. As for solar cells or silicone, they required much more investments. So anyway, so I started investing in downstream solar companies. And what did happen is that the holding company in 2005 decided that, looking at these downstream companies was too early. So in 2005, I actually left the company, and then I started Solgenics, company that Richard also mentioned. And so I've basically, with Solgenics, for the last 17 years, I've invested in downstream solar companies. Now, for me, obviously, so I started in solar in the beginning of 2003. In 2003, I got a call from Susan about this meeting that was going to happen in July of 2003, and she invited me to come to the Solar Circle. Now, one of the things that was interesting for me, right before that meeting in February of 2003, I actually participated in an energy conference of CERA, that's the Cambridge Energy Research Associates, and this energy conference was taking place in Houston. I was there in February, and I mean, it was mostly fossil fuel companies that came to this conference. And I remember when I was telling people that, I said, I work in solar. Most people looked at me and said, oh, is it a research activity? I mean, for most of the people, they didn't even think of companies that were active in the solar energy field. And that was in February of 2003. So I obviously was somewhat, not disillusioned, but I thought like, oh, wow, this is a really marginal business that I'm getting involved in here. And so when I joined, when I came to that Solar Circle meeting in 2003, that was for me a real eye-opener. Because, I mean, first of all, I sort of felt that I was, one of the few people that looked at solar energy, because, I mean, most of these people that I was dealing with, they were all looking at fossil fuel, whatever, And when I came to the Solar Circle, I mean, I was just amazed by, first of all, the history that people had. I mean, Julia was mentioning that as well. There were some people that had been in solar for years, and then the experience. And I was just, I just met these people and suddenly got much more confidence in actually looking into this field, because I've seen that people, and clever people, had been working on this for many, many years, trying to make this work, And what I also found interesting was that at that meeting, so Susan had actually taken a lot of care in having people that represented different constituencies. So I found people that were research, they came from research, people from manufacturing, upstream, downstream, installers, architects, were people that were working with public policy, communication, people from the investment field, philanthropy, and obviously individuals who are active in emerging markets. So it was, for me, it was very, very interesting to see all these different people represented in the Solar Circle. And we obviously started to discuss the situation of the market, and people obviously had a lot of information in terms of what that market looked like, and basically pretty much look in terms of how do you, get rid of some of these bottlenecks that made growth in this market more difficult. What I was very impressed was the connections that the people had within the circle. I mean, I was obviously brand new. I didn't really know anybody when I came to that meeting, but I saw that there were people there that not only had been in the industry for a long time, but they also knew each other very, very well. And they were also very, very open for looking to cooperate. I think that was one of the things that Susan also looked at. She looked at people that were willing to cooperate, and they were basically trying to see what they could do together. The other thing, which for me was also very interesting, although there were people with a lot of experience and had done a lot of times in solar, there were no prima donnas. There was really no one that basically said like, oh, I've done all this, whatever. No one was showing off. that were basically just trying to see what they could do together and, you know, and how they could cooperate. And I thought it was also interesting. I mean, people shared very openly. It was a confidential meeting. So in a certain sense, information that was being shared at the Solar Circle wasn't shared outside of the group. And I thought what was very interesting is that people, they talked about their successes, but they also talked about their failures. And there were obviously a number of those around as well. I mean, I think that was a very helpful process for the people there as well, that you could see what could work, but also what couldn't work, you know? And, you know, and then the other thing was really blown away is the goal of the group. The goal of the group, and Julie mentioned that as well, was to make solar a dominant power source in the world. And I was like, what? It was like I just started working in this field. I had the feeling this is a pretty, you know, from the first 6 months, I thought like it was pretty marginal. And then suddenly this group of people are saying, we're going to make solar the dominant power source in the world. Obviously loved the idea, but I was going like, oh, how is that going to happen? But it did, you know, it has happened, you know, over the last 20 years, all the work of this that the people did together made solar a dominant power source in the world. And a lot of the fossil fuel industries are now trying to look for ways how to get involved in solar and how to get their feet into that industry as well. I mean, for me on a personal level, what the Solar Circle meant is that, as I said, you know, I came to the group, I was I was a rookie. I mean, I didn't really know anything about it. People were basically had been in this for many, many years. But I found, you know, the group was very open and very inclusive. And I think that was also one of the characteristics that Susan was looking for by putting that group together. That, you know, although I didn't really know that much, people were very, very interested in my opinion. They also were very interested in where I came from, what my background was, and why I got into solar. So, I mean, from that point of view, it was for me very, very helpful. And I mean, to obviously get to know all these people with this huge amount of experience. The group was also very, very cooperative, looking for ways to work together and to enable each other in the group. And I know, for example, with Richard and Harish that I met in the Solar Circle, we also looked at ways to enable solar energy, you know, in emerging markets and getting people together there. And you know, so for me, I mean, in a certain sense, you know, the Solar Circle, not only was it a very effective group of collaborators, I mean, I also found a lot of friends there. So, I mean, in a certain sense, on a personal level, it also has been a very, very rich experience. So maybe I leave it at that. And so maybe I give it back to Lauren and see whether there are any questions or any questions from the group that we maybe can discuss.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I just want to reflect a little bit what I heard. Yes, and I can tell Susan and Walter are probably having internet connection issues. They're back. What I heard is that the people in the Solar Circle are people from various constituencies within the industry, but who share that mission, that they're there to collaborate, not to compete, which is one of the KIN's principles. And they're there to fulfill their life's mission, which is in this case about making solar available to the world. So I'd love to open this up for questions from anyone. I also want to give credit to Elisa Gravitz, who couldn't be with us today. When Susan moved to Vilcabamba, Elisa stepped in and has been serving as a support role through Green America and her division, the Center for Sustainability Solutions. We will be putting a link to that website in the show notes when this is published on our YouTube channel, but big shout out to Elisa. Okay, questions, comments, reflections? George.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for your incredible efforts and wanted to ask, how do we help this next stage of, you know, Susan's vision and what you've done? What have you learned that we can use to help us move this planet to a regenerative future?
I mean, one of the things that I felt, maybe guys, you chime in as well, but one of the things that I felt that within the solar circle. I mean, my experience within the solar circle was that we obviously looked at a lot of different ways in terms of trying to make solar dominant in the world. And I think one of the things that sort of happened, you know, over the meetings along, I think the focus was afterwards became much more in terms of public policy. What kind of public policy initiatives need to be there? And I mean, obviously, a lot of it was concentrated in California, but California is obviously, you know, leading state in the United States, and with that also in the world in terms of getting that industry, you know, making that industry further grow. But I think, at least one of my experiences was that the group concentrated very much in terms of, you know, rather than doing any, you know, everything, what is the thing where we can make the biggest difference in a short period of time? And so that's sort of what felt, I don't know whether Richard or whether Judy, whether you agree with that, but I mean, that's sort of what I felt, that they were really concentrated on areas where they could cooperate and make solar energy really dominant.
Yeah, one of the points I'll make is that our, because we have a relatively long arc now, there's been a logical evolution that matches the state of the overall solar market. And so we've kind of caught the wave, and the waves have changed from year to year and decade to decade. Titus is exactly right. A huge part beyond R&D for a new industrial or a advanced industrial contributor to an economy, you're going to get from R&D land, where we were before 2004, to initial deployment, to mass deployment. And during that period, kind of what the market needs changes. However, what doesn't change is that those initial leaders, and this is something that I've really appreciated about the solar industry, the battery industry, the wind industry, those initial leaders, the passionate ones, stay engaged and end up moving from into and out of public service, into and out of business, into and out of different roles. But there's a continuity, even when you have a company that fails, and we have a couple of those in the solar industry, quite a few actually. A complete faceplant of a business does not mean to extinguish people. People continue. They move along to the next thing. They take their learnings with them. And that network effect of having those learnings and those peoples and those connections, it allows us to move from focus area to focus area. Solar at this point is well on its way to our goal. Could we accelerate it? Yes. It's a question of pace and scale. How fast can we increase the slope of the adoption line is really the question at this point. And a lot of the answer to that question is actually less about solar itself and more about the rest of the market. It's how do you enable grids to operate with very high penetration of solar for an extended period of time. That's not about the solar, that's about the other resources. At the other end of the spectrum, there's all these people. I loved, Richard, you had a great presentation today. I'm going to propose we send that out to the circle. The amount of the population of the world that still doesn't have access to electricity is shocking. And so we're at this point where those early adoption, which was very much around rural electrification, which enabled mass deployment of solar at all scales in the developed world, we've now brought cost of solar down, where we can offer affordable energy using solar as its core to everybody in the world. We've really completed the circle. It's the most amazing statement that that's been done in 20 years, and there's lots of push to be had, but then there's kind of the aura around the circle is much larger now. So you see a lot of our members that are working in storage or wind or offshore wind, electric vehicles. Solar enables so much, and all of that other work is now what many of our members are doing.
Yeah, I'll follow up on what Julie is saying. It's interesting because our early work in developing countries created some early markets. So there was actually some place to sell product, commercial product. But then as the industry advanced and could actually begin to compete first with some subsidies and then with less subsidies, for grid tied and utility scale, and the Solar Circle group, I mean, my sense is that an inevitable and important focus on California as a market to really prove out. It's just amazing what's been accomplished in California. And so that has really driven large scale, this graph I showed with the 200,000 megawatts, getting the scale with grid tied. It's not the off-grid systems that have created that scale, but still what's been great for us to see, and the off-grid was really a big focus when the industry didn't have anything else. But now with the large scale and larger scale grid tied, it's less of a focus. But there's a lot of people involved in the off-grid, and it's not just California, not just the United States. We really have to have a transition to sustainable energy, global transition to sustainable energy around the world. And one of the things that we found, Titus and I working the meeting we had in India is just, you find geniuses everywhere, and I think there's a lot of potential to support small and medium enterprises. I'm big, particularly on local enterprises, because they could be multi-generational. They aren't necessarily a foreigner that comes in and then does it for a while and then leaves, but really getting local people that have that commitment. And so there's a lot of potential there, and we do need to move all of humanity on this path. We can't have humanity taking the old path, fossil fuel path. I'm proud to say that in Honduras, when they actually even extend the electric grid, or if you're using the electric grid, it's over 60% renewables. I just presented at a conference organized by the U.S. Department of Commerce in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, on mini grids, and the Secretary of Energy was there, and the Regulatory Commission, all the energy people were there, and I was given a chance to speak, and I presented the options to electrify the rural areas, which is what they were talking about. And I said, well, when you extend the grid in Honduras, it's over 60% renewables. And in the United States, I didn't take California or Vermont. I took overall is 21% renewables. And I said, maybe the Hondurans can teach the gringos how to have a lower carbon footprint. Actually, they're kind of started to leapfrog by having renewable incentives in place. So really, I have a sense of urgency that it has to go global. We, who are, more resources, more technology, need to help in that process. My company donated the very first grid-tied system in Honduras in February 2012 to the university where the electrical engineering students were. And I said, we've got to get that known in Honduras. It was before there were any laws. We got it connected with a letter of no objection from the electric company. But, I have a sense of urgency that we need more collaboration than ever. And we have some amazing, the talent that's in the Solar Circle to, help spread that. One of the people we have doing tracking solar, there's amazing penetration in the marketplace around the world for large scale utilities, and there's just a lot of potential. I just think that's urgent, and it's so if you have connections in a particular country and you have friends there and you want to encourage the kinds of things that have been happening within the Solar Circle, I think that's a place to start, and really find the opportunities, business opportunities to make it grow. That's my sense, and we were fortunate, Titus and I, to have a great group that we gathered in India, and I continue to stay networked with people working around the world in the off-grid scene. But that's now in developing countries. Now that the prices have come down, it's and you don't need as much subsidy. There's a lot more grid tied. Like some of the last slides I showed, even though my presentation was focused on the fact that in our backyard, people are using kerosene lamps and candles. But yeah, we're starting grid tied now, and so that's my thought. There's a lot of potential. It's to find those connections and help build on it.
Great, thank you. I just, I see that Hank has his hand up and Terry has his hand up. I want to just, and Benjamin too, all right. I want to make a quick announcement. We've got 15 minutes and we do our best to start and end on time. If we go a couple minutes over, just if anyone has to leave at the bottom of the half hour, feel free to. And I want to also mention that Benjamin and his colleague, Charles Burkham, will be presenting on July 28th. Sharon Joy is coming up in November with her group, and she's got a question in the chat. So if anybody has a chance to take a look at that. We've got fabulous upcoming presentations. So please stay tuned. And okay, Hank, looks like you took your hand down, so I'm going to pass it to Terry. And Terry, you're muted. If you can unmute yourself. Oh,
yeah, sorry about that.
there you go. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back because I'm 77 years old. So I'm thinking back to the 1980s when solar was a dream, social responsible investment was a dream, you know, the environmental movement was a dream, you know, microcredit was a dream. And all these things have occurred and they've matured. And, you know, this circle that Susan started was one of the kind of hotbed beginnings of the solar industry growing. I want to ask the people on the phone call, not just the three speakers, but the people on the phone call. But first of all, I want to really thank Titus for that story, because it was just very interesting to hear your story of how you developed in this and how you grew in it. Because that's exactly what a circle like this was supposed to do. And you told the story of how it did do it. So in terms of Kinship Earth, I'm thinking, what are the other things like solar that right now we should have a kinship circle on? So I'm just curious what other people would think is the beginning of something beautiful that is just at the beginning, that a kinship circle would really be good to start on that one. Does anybody have any ideas? Please throw them out. You can throw them, you can take your turn and speak, or you can put something in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, great idea.
Clean water.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yes. And we are extending our networks. Soon we'll be making an announcement about a platform we're collaborating with called the Open Impact Network, where we'll be able to come and have profiles and see each other and make it more streamlined in how we share and connect other people's projects and events. So that is in the pipeline. So that's a good question to be thinking of. Thank you, Terry. And Hank, I see that you've got your hand up. I want to give you an opportunity to share.
Hey there, what a privilege to hear Julie and Richard and Titus and this extraordinary transition from when at the beginning it looked like a pipe dream, and now it's the #1 commercially successful cost on the margin choice, which is an interesting paradox because it's the hardware cost, of course, that drives one's sense of where the value opportunity is. In other words, the cheapest choice on the curve is the one that everybody looks at first. But if you consider Terry's insight, the question about how to build on the capacity of networks to understand value and deliver value, I actually had the privilege of talking to Harish easily 10 years ago now, and I asked him of the Selco India adventure, and I asked him, have you explored the wellness outcomes of not burning paraffin in a hut as a value proposition that somebody might actually be willing to buy? Have you actually considered the wellness implications of solar viewed as a deliverable through the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, or through the ESG bond community, which is struggling to figure out how not to view social and environmental and governance outcomes as a cost, but rather as a service. We have, and that service can be bundled and sold in secondary markets. wellness outcomes are valuable. And the PV community delivers an extraordinary spectrum of wellness outcomes. But Harish said, you know, we know that. We also know that the kids who carry batteries down to the charging station are staying out of school to do that. And there's an education cost value equation. When those panels go up, the kids stay in school. And that's a valuable outcome, but who buys that? So my question to Julie and the team quickly would be, of the many, many measurable value, I mean, carbon, climate, not flooding Florida, that's a valuable thing. Which amongst those measurable values are actually starting to look like they could be bundled and sold as wellness, as outcomes that are co-benefits to the investment in the solar capacity of the planet?
What you're describing is substantially more cogent to think about things on a comprehensive basis. The problem is that our market-making regulatory systems globally rarely think in comprehensive, cogent ways. They tend to be siloed by technology or resource or industry. In California, where we do have a legitimate effort and sometimes even success getting agencies to legitimately work with each other, and to the Biden administration's credit, they're doing DOE, DOT stuff for electric vehicles that are very helpful. We have something that the California Resources Board calls a low carbon fuel standard. This is total wonky stuff, but what it basically says is if you're not going to pollute on a carbon basis and other air quality benefits, you're going to have a tradable commodity, which will essentially create a market benefit that you can then resell and get money for. In some cases by creating electricity, for example, through hydrogen, or in other cases by avoiding fuel use, like an electric vehicle charging station. The reason I mention this is not to say that like that's replicable. I think California's regulatory infrastructure is incredibly difficult to replicate in other places, but it's not like there's nothing happening in that world. It just has to be carefully stitched together in an incumbent regulatory apparatus that's poorly suited for that comprehensive thought process, which is incredibly obvious, but generally very difficult to implement within existing power structures.
You know, just to expand, you know, that example, what you said when you talked to Harish about the kids when they have to, you know, with the batteries, when they have to carry the batteries and they can't go to school. It was actually very interesting because he actually expanded. I mean, last time I talked to him, he was actually talking about the fact is one of the things that they now, that they started to do in India is, for example, install solar systems on schools, but solar systems that are much bigger than what the school needs. And what they're actually doing is that they say, when the kids come to school, they can bring a battery with them and charge it while they're in school. And so the fact is, if the kids don't go to school, the family will not have electricity at home at night. And so it suddenly becomes like, you know, like a co-product in a certain sense of solar that these families will make sure that children will go to school every day so that they have electricity at night. And so that's one of the things we can create, these byproducts that are obviously very, very, you know, very, very productive.
Awesome. I saw that Benjamin had his hand up and I want to make sure he has a chance to share.
Oh, sure. It was just really, thank you so much. Wonderful presentations and inspiring. The whole idea of creating a circle, the way of associating with people rather than competing, associating and growing together. I just had a question about constituencies, and if we learned anything from the various circles about, you know, what constituency might have been missing that could have made it move or grow, you know, better, just as a learning for, you know, for future constituencies, which I saw a few suggestions. I put in biodynamic agriculture because I think if we all ate biodynamic food, we'd be able to think better. And so, anyways, if there's anything that comes to mind that maybe in the thinking about constituencies could be considered in the future.
Well, I did 40 networks over 40 years, and so I did an awful lot of work about constituencies, and pretty much the networks have felt that they had a good representation of constituencies. So it takes a lot of work, but we get there.
Is there an archetype though, Susan? You know, like, maybe it's on your website. I've forgotten, you know, I know there were 30 some, and I don't remember if they were like archetypal that would work for any circle.
No, it's so different. Everyone was fairly different. So it would usually took me a year to figure out the constituencies and then find the people that were most respected. It takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. You know, if you think for a moment about the Earth, and you imagine if every constituency was collaborative instead of competitive, can you imagine the higher profile of Earth's health if we did that? So, I mean, I wish the films that Lauren is putting together could just be mass shared freely all over the world, because it's so well proven, it's so powerful, it's so inspiring, and it's so saving of Earth that, you know, we're all a little dumb, but we're not stupid. So, you know, getting the story of the success of KINs around the world is really important now, and everyone can do it. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, and I just want to add one thing. And one of the things that Susan identified in each of the KINs members is people whose life mission was already related to that path, right? So you're in it wholeheartedly. And so it's identifying those people to come together in groups that make sense. And then where we are now is this opportunity to cross-pollinate thanks to technology, which we didn't necessarily have before. So Richard, and then Hank has.
Wait, I just have to say one more thing. One more thing. It's crucial that half the members be men and half women. It's crucial because so much of what's set us back for so long is the sexism stuff and bullshit. It has to be half men and half women, because that's how it works best.
Woo!
I agree. Hey, one thing I'd like to mention. I think the meetings we had together for essentially bonding was a real strength, but it also created a weakness over time, because it was one of the reasons why we gravitated more towards people who were from the United States getting together. We had some people from Europe originally, and then, you know, it's called like the travel to have the presence. So actually with COVID and now being, you know, on Zoom here, it might be a way to expand what is the international connections, the fact that we're trying to protect the Earth. And our group did end up gravitating towards being, you know, kind of US centric, as opposed to as international, I think, as it was originally envisioned a little bit more. And so I think that was just a necessity, that these were meetings of getting together physically together, and then the travel distance and all. So I'm just thinking along those lines, how to, let's say, improve on that, perhaps with some degree of hybrid. And we've had meetings, Solar Circle meetings now, virtually as well, although it's great to get together to be with people. But I think that created the bonding, but then it kind of limited the scope internationally. So that's one thought I had.
Great, Hank. And then we are coming up on the bottom of our time together today. So I want to make sure that those folks who have a question have a chance to. So go ahead, Hank.
Thank you. Quickly, given the time constraint, I think what Julie points out is that the context, the regulatory, financial, and science-based context is yet to be integrated in a way that allows us to have a business partnership with future generations. That value, of course, is delivered without money. The value of not flooding Florida is not a financial transaction. It's a real outcome. I think the global finance community is fully aware of the fact that this framework is missing and that we're on the wrong track. So if we can jointly use the community tools that Kinship and other networks, Solar Circle and onward, represent, to build a partnership that allows finance, science, and the measurement community to build a market for long-term outcomes, we could suddenly have a global framework for investing at the speed and scale that's required. I like to think of that as the community ecosystem redevelopment district that would use a standard framework for measuring the co-benefits delivered by better investments and capture the spread between dirty old assets and the clean ones that will replace them. That's a concept I'd love to explore at greater length with this Solar Circle team. And thank you so much for inspiring us with your success.
I can envision a summit of some sort in the future with where we bring together some of the key strategists here and propose some ideas. Okay, Sandra has her hand up, and then I know that Sharon Joy had asked a question about whether or not our dearly beloved Hazel Henderson was part of the Solar Circle, and she put a few other notes in the chat. So was Hazel part of that?
Hazel I worked with very closely, but she was never she was so busy doing her own stuff, she didn't really have time for the circle.
All right, thank you. Okay, Sandra, what's your question?
Actually, I don't have a question. The fact is that I really haven't introduced myself. I just mentioned that I'm here probably through my connection with Susan, but I would like to say just a couple sentences that I've worked extensively with environmental groups, and I live in Puerto Rico. And after I met Susan and learned about KINS, I was very inspired, and I tried to get people together to see if we could put together something like a Solar Circle in Puerto Rico, but I wasn't for some reason aware of the Solar Circle, and my initiative kind of didn't go anywhere. So now that I have been invited to this meeting, I would like to reinitiate with some of the people on the island who are very active in the area of creating solar systems, networks, expanding solar systems into the countryside. It gives me a renewed sense of purpose. So I just like to thank whoever it was, Susan, Rebecca, for having invited me to participate in this meeting.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. And Sharon Joy put a little note in the chat. She said it's the KINS selection, agreements, and practices that is the secret sauce. And so we do have some free ebooks on our website. Susan has written a book called The Trojan Horse of Love, which has her whole story, and it contains specific steps for starting a KINS group. And then I have synthesized that into something that we're calling the KINS Network Playbook, which is more of a step-by-step guide that talks about membership. It's got some sample agendas, some formats, some basic background principles that anyone can use to identify people in their community to have an action-oriented group to make an impact. And really that's what it's all about, is we find our life purpose and passion. We come together with other people who share from the heart, and we bloom where we're planted and start where we are. So I look forward to more opportunities to engage, to cross-pollinate our networks. As I mentioned, we've got some fantastic presentations coming up in the future. And then I will be putting links to our presenters today, to their websites, and how you can contact them when I publish this video. So any final closing remarks? You can all open up your microphones and say our farewells. Yes,
Lauren, you are sent from God. I mean, this was never going to happen. KINS was just going to be forgotten and everything, and you came in and you had every skill that you need to make this go global, free. You are doing it. I am just so thrilled with you. Thank you from God.
Thank you, Susan, for building this beautiful foundation that we can all connect as part of this network of like-minded, heart-centered leaders that you have brought together. So honors to you, kudos. Quick little thing too, just for those of you who don't know, Susan and Walter are on the farm, Finca Sagrada in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. And we are working behind the scenes to develop a regenerative eco-village pilot program there. So there's going to be more to come about that. If you want information on that, do reach out to us. And thank you again to our distinguished guests from the Solar Circle. We are so grateful to have gotten to have like a sneak peek behind the scenes of what it's like to be in that group, some of the work that you've been doing. And we encourage everyone to reach out and connect with each other as part of this extended KINS community. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank
God
you.
bless. God bless.
Thank you.
God bless.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you for joining us for today's Kinship Earth Connections event. We encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more and get involved, please visit us at kinshipearth.org.